According to Heiner Bielefeld, an independent United Nations human rights expert, things on the island of Cyprus are getting better. Religious tensions are as low as ever, and interfaith dialogues at an all-time high. A Greek Orthodox bishop was allowed to cross the Green Line, the border splitting the two communities on the island, and preach to his diocese for the first time in 18 months. At the same time, the Grand Mufti of Cyprus, Talip Atale, was granted access to the south and held services at Hala Sultan Mosque, a right granted by Greek Orthodox Archbishop Chrysostomos II. This monumental agreement, reached on October 22nd of this year, marks the first time in 50 years the two faiths on the island, the Greek Orthodox of the south and the Turkish Muslims of the north, have had a dialogue of any kind. I'm very pleased about the recent positive developments and improved climate of interreligious communication in Cyprus, Bielefeld said. These may seem like small steps, but they constitute a huge leap for the religious communities concerned. Where some experts believe this new breakthrough could have a positive process on resolving the conflict as a whole, it is important to note that the Cyprus problem is not a religious issue, but an ethno-cultural one that stems back hundreds of years. Cyprus is an island in the Mediterranean about 3/4 the size of Connecticut. It is said to be the birthplace of Aphrodite, the Greek god, and is a popular archaeological site due to its rich history with the ancient Greeks. It is 44 miles from Turkey and 600 miles from mainland Greece. Throughout its long history, it has been under the control of the Phoenicians, the Mycenaeans, the Assyrians, the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Syrians, the Byzantines, the French, the Venetians, the Genoese, the Turkish, or the Ottomans who ruled for 300 years, and the British. Due to its strategic location, there are still 2 large British military bases on the island, but as a whole it is independent, although the situation is complicated. There are 2 distinct nations on the island of Cyprus: the Greek Cypriots, which constitute about 77% of the population, and the Turkish Cypriots, which hold about 18%. Relations between the two groups have never been all that friendly, but not always violent. Regardless, there has always been strong patriotism to each community's respective mother country. In the Greek sector, the southern portion of the island, Greek is spoken and Greek flags can be seen flying everywhere, where Cypriot flags are limited, usually hanging exclusively outside government buildings. Students are taught standard modern Greek, but speak it with the Cypriot accent as well as some augmented grammar. They trace their origins to the Mycenaeans, who settled during the second half of the 2nd millennium BCE, and are very proud of this ancient heritage. The Republic of Cyprus joined the EU in 2004 and have enjoyed a high standard of living since the 1990s. The Turkish side of the island, or the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, is very much the same way. Turkish is almost exclusively spoken. The Turkish flag is presented proudly, often alongside the nation's flag, which is extremely similar to the flag of the mother country. There are monuments of past Turkish heroes scattered around the island as well. It is a new state, founded in 1975, and is not recognized as a sovereign nation internationally except by the country of Turkey. Both states have their own textbooks and media, both of which effectively alienate the other culture and create an outgroup to hate. Atrocities have occurred to both sides of the island, but it wasn't until the 1960s and 70s when the island fell into a state of chaos. The British were in control of the island until 1960 and had possessed the island since the Ottomans had handed it over to them in 1878. Prior to 1960, Greek Cypriot forces waged a guerrilla war with the goal of independence from the British, and enosis, or unification, with Greece. Enosis was not accomplished, but they did succeed in independence, with a power-sharing government between the Turkish and Greek Cypriots. As previously mentioned, the Greeks hold majority on the island, and thus the Greeks dominated the government, resulting in Archbishop Makarios being elected president. Turkish resentment built up when they felt they were being treated as second-class citizens, when the central government demonstrated a perceptible stinginess in allocating economic aid or in sharing resources for the education, development, and housing within Turkish communities. This was before the Green Line, and Turkish Cypriots lived in enclaves scattered around the island. In 1963, President Makarios began talks on constitutional changes that would drop power sharing and push for enosis. The disagreement became bloody, nearly causing a Turkish invasion. Outside forces intervened, resulting in an outcome which was seen as a victory for the Turkish Cypriots. They, for the first time in decades, gained clear Turkish support against Greek Cypriot policy. They had seen the UK successfully block the Greek Cypriot and Greek efforts to gain support in the UN, and had been given a larger share than their numerical status dictated in the democracy that was to emerge. This point was essentially the beginning of ethno-nationalist conflict on the island. Just a few years later, in 1974, Greece facilitated a military coup. This resulted in a Turkish invasion of 30,000 men and the division of the island along the previously established Green Line. Not long after the invasion, the coup collapsed, and a ceasefire was reached, but not after thousands of Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots were displaced, having to move to their respective sides of the island. The Turkish Cypriots established the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, a country only recognized by Turkey despite the fact that the South still technically had political power of the whole island. Clearly, this is not simply an issue of the island of Cyprus by itself, as many outside powers got involved in one way or another, often amplifying nationalist sentiments. Disregarding Turkey and Greece for now, many Western and Eastern powers have muddled in the island's business. The British, as well as the American and Soviet governments, have gotten involved in Cyprus for a variety of not unselfish, nationalistic reasons involving the relations to one another and to the two mother countries, both members of NATO. Once the two states had been established on the island, the Soviets had substantial activity in the Greek portion, where the US attempted to strengthen the Turkish side. In regards to the mother countries themselves, it is important to establish that both the military coup and invasion were a direct result of their interference, not the inhabitants of the island. Their intervention did increase resentment to the other side. For the Greek Cypriot side, the Turkish Cypriots stood in the way of their rights of self-determination. For the Turkish Cypriot side, the Greek Cypriots wanted to subjugate them as a minority in a Greek state directed from Athens. The coup and invasion only strengthened these beliefs. With that said, briefly after the invasion of 1974, the Greek Cypriot community dropped their ethno-nationalist tendencies for a Cypriotism mindset. That is, that Cyprus has its own character and should be viewed differently than both of its motherlands. For a period of time, the Greek Cypriots seemed to focus on reunification and drop their ethnic agenda. The most concrete example of this is the New Cyprus Association, an organization founded in 1975 which focused on fostering Cypriot independence. They recognized that the crisis was born of ethno-nationalism and never wanted the Greek majority to be undermined by nationalist extremists and Greek military again. Unfortunately, in the mid-1980s, a series of elections put a right-wing coalition in Greek Cypriot government, which promoted Greek nationalism and put an end to the Cypriotist mindset. As previously mentioned, things are somewhat improving in Cyprus. Both sides wish for a united country, but the army in the north is hindering the Greek Cypriots' progress, and the lack of a system to replace the army in the north is hindering the Turkish Cypriots' progress. It is a matter of security and trust, much like many ethno-cultural conflicts around the world. Only time will tell if these two peoples can unite once again.